Hola, comrades! Today's topic of interest, Sun and Moon. These two games fulfilled the potential promised by X and Y. Visually stunning, emotionally evocative, and genuinely new feeling, these games marked a new chapter in the franchise, once again breathing life into what had, despite the best efforts of X and Y, remained stale and archaic. Released in November of 2016, they were the harbingers of a truly spectacular 2017 for Nintendo, a year in which the company rediscovered how to imbue players with that resplendent sense of discovery. They are, without hyperbole, the greatest games in the Pokémon franchise, and some of the greatest games Nintendo has released this decade. And then Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon came along and ruined everything, but I'll get to that another day. The Island Challenge was a bold departure from the tired gym system that every main series Pokémon games before this had used. It was a perfect fit to the idea of these separate islands as distinct mini-adventures in their own rights. The region of Alola, in which these games take place, is based around the Hawaiian Islands, and having visited the islands after having thought of the concept, the developers understood that each island has its own unique culture, but these individual cultures are stitched together by a larger Hawaiian culture, so Sun and Moon were structured accordingly. I don't know if the Gym Challenge will return. I highly doubt the Island Challenge will be continued past Alola, if for no other reason than because the next region introduced in the Pokémon franchise is unlikely to be a series of islands. So will they introduce a new system entirely, or will they return to the gym system? I don't have the answers, but I do know that the Island Challenge was perfectly fitted to Alola, and that in of itself is impressive. The structure of gameplay should thematically sync with the world of the game, but that's hard to pull off. This isn't the main reason why Sun and Moon stood out though. That would be the story. Black and White are still the games that are most commonly invoked when the topic of Pokemon games with actual stories is brought up, and I appreciate the story of those games, enough so that I made a whole video on it. But I won't deny that there are serious flaws. The characters still don't feel quite human. I'm a big fan of N's gradual transformation throughout the game, but he still feels like a character who was only created because the plot needed a character to fill a certain role. He doesn't have much personality aside from that which is directly related to the plot of these games. More pressingly, the game promises to be more ethically interesting than it turns out to be, as Team Plasma's mantra, that Pokemon are oppressed by their trainers, is never given actual credence or examination. And in the third act, the game cops out by professing that the actual core of Team Plasma, minus N, didn't actually believe in their core ethos. Pokémon Sun and Moon's story isn't as lofty in its thematic ambitions as Black and White's, but it's much better executed. There are two enemy teams in this game. The obviously evil team is Team Skull. The twist about these guys is that they're not actually threatening. They're thugs, but they're mostly hapless. They crack bad jokes, and their gangster persona is very obviously nothing but posturing. They're more endearing than anything else. They're very pitiable. Late in the game, you visit a town they've taken over, and it's less this great metropolis of evil than the squalid, derelict, rancid, ramshackle little burg that they have no idea how to maintain. On the other side of the spectrum, there is the professional, fastidious, diaphanous Aether Foundation, which claims to be committed to Pokemon conservation, but is actually headed by the psychotic Lucamine. Aether, not Skull, is the main enemy team of this game. This is a brilliant bait and switch that shakes the series from the rusted shackles of its past. When Team Skull are able to act in any coordinated fashion, it is because they have been given a job by Aether. The boss of Team Skull, Guzma, is a misfit, an outcast, the opposite of the charismatic Archie, the dominating Gestus, the calculating Maxie, or the suave Giovanni. He wants a place in this world. He wants to be strong. He wants to be respected. Lusamine gave him all these things. It makes sense why he's loyal to her. However, he's not nearly as interesting of a character as Lusamine herself, or Lusamine's two kids, Gladion and Lillie. Gladion is introduced as the mean rival to Hao's nice rival, but while he does serve as Hao's foil throughout the game, there's a lot more to his character than that. He is flush with teenage angst, but his burden is legitimate. His mother has lost her mind and become both neglectful and abusive. Gladion has broken free from his mother's control and taken Type Null with him. He's not exactly the warmest person, but he's sympathetic, and his intentions are good. At the start of the game, Lillie, his younger sister, has not broken free from her mother's control. Unlike Gladion, she left her mother not because she wanted to, but because she couldn't stand what her mother was doing to Nebby. Her flight was that of desperation. It is through her personal journey that she grows and evolves, and finally gains the courage to stand up to her mother and call her out, asserting her individual identity against the conformist, controlling desires of Lusamine. I'm going to say it straight up right now. Lillie is my favorite character in Pokémon. By considerably wide margin, actually. She is the main reason these games work for me as well as they do. The beautiful scenery, the island challenge, the Alola forms, the bait and switch with the villains, it all works outstandingly well, but Lillie brings it together, makes it personal. The purpose of great art is to reveal and create truth, and to build culture, and if it does this primarily through vast emotional landscapes, then it can be concluded that characters are the most important part of any work that has characters, and that the characters are the central node from which the rest of the work flows, for the characters are the window to the emotion of a work. In the context of a work, it doesn't matter if a character dies. What matters is the effect that death has on the other characters. Lillie makes Sun and Moon work. Lusamine and Gladion's characters are significantly more powerful because of the relationships those characters have with Lillie. Why is she such a strong character? Why does she stand out from the likes of Barry and Tierno? To start, let's compare her to N, the most acclaimed character in the series, and also the character she most resembles. Both are enigmatic but willful. Both are confused but determined. Most importantly, both have practically the same arc. Let me explain. They're both naive and unworldly people thrown into the great bastion of a world they do not understand. They're both unsure of themselves. They've both been sheltered their entire lives by their parents, who are the main villains of their respective titles. They've experienced a skewed perspective of the world, and experiencing what the world is truly like, they slowly begin to change as people, turning against their parents. They're both initially skeptical of the relationship between Pokémon and trainers, but they both grow to learn there is value in that relationship. Both are the true protagonists of their respective stories. They have to move past the indoctrination they've undergone, which is no easy task, and chart their own courses. So why is it that I prefer one over the other? Mostly, it's that Lillie is a much more complete character than N. She's three-dimensional. She has hopes and dreams and fears and anxieties. She drifts in emotion from wistful to melancholy to exhilarated and euphoric. N is undoubtedly the more eye-catching character. He stands out, what with his green hair, his peculiar philosophy, and his lightning-fast speech pattern. But once his mystery is uncovered, he's nothing but an eccentric, confused man drifting through the world, trying to achieve his dreams while wondering whether he's actually in the right. That's not nothing, and I like N a lot, but there's nothing more to his character. He's the kind of person I want to learn more about, but he doesn't receive enough screen time over the course of Black and White for other aspects of his character to be fleshed out. This wouldn't be as much of a problem if his character was revealed through his relationships with others, but he doesn't have a lot of relationships, aside from his bond with the player, who is a blank slate, and his bond with Getsus, who is not that interesting of a character. And I should also add, his relationship with Gestus still remains somewhat opaque by the end of the game. Conversely, you spend the entirety of the final island you visit in Alola, Pony Island, with Lillie. Before this, she accompanies you at several points in your journey, but she's always nervous and afraid. It's not literally an escort mission, but it takes on the tone of one. However, after Lusamine seizes Cosmog and disappears into Ultra Space, Lillie throws off the vestiges of her past conditioning and commits herself to rescuing her friend and her mother. From Seafolk Village to Vast Pony Canyon to Ultra Space and beyond, she accompanies you. And it's oddly natural considering this had never been done in a Pokemon game before. Sure, you've had temporary traveling companions, but an actual traveling partner that gradually grows bolder and more resolute and more confident in themselves as they travel with you? Never. It's so comfortable, so effective, that it's a serious question why this was never done in the past. The anime, for all its faults, understood that one person going on an adventure was not nearly as interesting as multiple people going on an adventure. As a well-traveled person myself, I can attest that the dynamic is entirely different. When you're one person traveling, it's very much about getting from point A to point B. When you're in a group, it's about the experience. It's about the conversation, all the memories and regrets and joys, all the past happenings evoked by the adventure. The actual character development she undergoes is a mix of what is standard to the series and what is genuinely intriguing. Dealing with the damage inflicted by a neglectful and emotionally abusive parent is not exactly a common topic for Pokemon games. There are hints of this dynamic between N and Getsus, but it is never expanded upon, and N never lays it on the line, detailing to the player in confidence what he has gone through, as Lillie does in Sun and Moon. My favorite scene in the entire series comes when she and the player duck in from the rain on Executor Island to a cave, and she reminisces on a memory from her past when she was playing out in the rain. Lusamine ran after her, but instead of disciplining her or pulling her out, Lusamine danced with her daughter. They both caught a cold, but Lillie did not care. She got to sleep in the big bed with her mother, and she was so happy that she thought she was dreaming. I love this monologue. Lillie displays the abject vulnerability absent from N or any other character in this franchise. Through this happy memory, turned tragic by its harsh juxtaposition with the present, Lillie lays bare the innermost layers of her soul. Sharing a story like this requires a deep level of trust, and that she has developed this level of trust with you says a lot about how much you've impacted her life. As to the story itself, Lillie has two main purposes for telling it to you. The first is to elucidate the tragedy of her and Lusamine, to reveal that the relationship between them wasn't always pain and sadness and abuse, that there was joy in it at one point too. And that fact makes the spiral of insanity into which Lusamine has entered all the more wretched. The second is to rationalize her desire to save her mother, which she realizes is hard to explain. Despite the abuse Lusamine has inflicted upon her, she knows who her mother once was, and she believes her mother can be snapped out of her madness, a hypothesis which turns out to be true. Lillie believes in the power of change, not out of naivete, but out of sheer force of will. She has done what she before believed was impossible and escaped from her mother's grasp, so she is riding high. She is optimistic and idealistic where she once was timid and afraid. She wants to believe that the world can be made better, and her own experiences further this belief. Over the course of her journey, she goes from being frightened of Pokemon battles to going to Kanto to start her very own Pokemon adventure. This is the standard part of her character progression, but it was done surprisingly well. As soon as she was introduced with the trait of disliking Pokemon battles, I immediately stopped playing and scrawled a note to myself. She is totally gonna become a Pokemon trainer by the end of this adventure. And I was right! But it's not like I made a clever analysis. I didn't take 500 different factors into account and use a boatload of esoterica Sherlock style to arrive at that conclusion. I simply thought to myself, this is a Pokemon game. Nintendo won't allow any character to maintain an anti-Pokemon battling position over the course of a game. It is predictable development. I will fully admit that. But my cynicism was slowly chipped away until I fell in love with even this predictable part of Lillie's character development. As I've always said, it's not about the concept, it's about the execution. And the execution here is excellent. One of the few problems I have with N's character development is how it's primarily ideological instead of personal. He's confused, and so he wanders across Unova, and he slowly finds the answers he seeks. But he doesn't really have to change as a person in order to do so. He has to open himself up to new ideas, yes, but his newfound respect for the bond between trainer and Pokemon is not tied to any greater growth. This is not the case with Lillie. When she is afraid of Pokemon battles, she is also afraid of life. She is scarred from her experiences with Lusamine. She still wears the clothes her mother dressed her in, while commenting that her mother always dressed her. Clothes, therefore, become a symbol of control. Lusamine loved Lillie up to the point when she started thinking for herself. When she followed Lusamine's commands, she was beautiful, but when she acted on her own right and started forming her own opinions and ideals, she was dismissed as ugly and worthless. After Lusamine escapes into ultra space with Nebby, Lillie undergoes a radical transformation. Her leitmotif changes from detached and mysterious to energetic and exhilarated. More importantly, she changes her clothes, marking a significant milestone in her freeing herself from Lusamine's influence. She calls this her Z-Power form. Like a Pokemon's Z-Power allows it to access forces it doesn't normally have access to, she believes that she has access to a new power within herself now. Her new clothes are more practical for adventuring than the Nihilego-like dress she was dressed in before, but more importantly, they're hers. This marks a new era in her life. She continues to change as she travels with the player and grows more confident in the new her. At the same time, she becomes more receptive to Pokemon battling, and the reason why says a lot about her shifting character. Trainers really can go anywhere as long as they have their Pokemon, can't they? She says to you on Executor Island. I'm beginning to understand the appeal. She's not turning to Pokemon solely because she's been convinced that Pokemon battling is morally correct, but because she believes it will unlock possibilities for her. Finally free from Lusamine's control, she is emboldened. She wants to explore the world and find out who she is and who she can become. Becoming a Pokemon trainer is a way for her to do this. It is not her end goal. This is not a story about a young girl who becomes a Pokemon trainer. This is a story about a young girl who frees herself from the influences of her abusive mother, who grows as a person until she's strong enough to live her own life and free the people she cares about. Becoming a Pokemon trainer is only an outcome of that. is a good character. Lillie is a great character. I don't think a lot of people can understand that because their version of a great character is so heavily influenced by the critical atmosphere created by a horde of snob, posh critics who believe that if a character isn't constantly melancholy and spending hours upon hours pondering matters these critics consider serious or timely, they cannot be a great character. And that just flat isn't true. At all. A lot of glum, overly serious characters can be hollow. Their purported importance can be absolutely spurious. And a lot of cheerful, upbeat characters can also be quite well crafted. Both darkness and light are needed to create a great character, but the balance between them is up to you. A great character is one that isn't too perfect, but has flashes of true brilliance, that's empathetic, but also leads the viewer to question them. And that can describe a wide variety of characters. Anyway, if you like what you saw today, consider donating to my Patreon so I can produce even more willful content. Also, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that transformative stuff. Adios, comrades!